Do you have a story to share with the world? Of course you do. We all have stories to share. An Anchor podcast allows you to share your interests in a way that connects to others all across the globe. If you have been considering starting your own podcast and don't know where to begin, Anchor makes it easy to record, edit, and publish with the click of a button. You can even add music. Whether it's crime dramas, self-improvement, paranormal adventures, or tips about parenting, you too can share your unique imprint on the world. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. You've got this. I believe in you. Welcome to the Existential Empath Podcast. My name is Tanya, and I am an intuitive empath. My intention is to share valuable tools and techniques that I have learned so you can tap into your own inner healer naturally and intuitively. Welcome back, everyone. I have Gretchen Shanks here with me today, and Gretchen is a Somatic Intimacy and Relationship Coach. And the topic that we are going to talk about today is called Tuned In and Turned On, Overcoming Libido Issues During Intimacy. Thank you for coming on the show today, Gretchen.
Thank you for opening up this conversation. I love it.
Absolutely. So I am recognizing with a lot of my clients, specifically females, that they are having a hard time with sex drive. And first, though, I want to talk about what is somatics and what is a somatic body worker?
So somatic just means of the body.
Okay.
Right. So, and technically I'm not a body worker. So at least when I hear the word body work, I think of like massage therapists. There is a class of intimacy coach called a sexological body worker that can do intimate body work, intimate touch body work as part of the overall practice. But I am a somatic oriented coach who focuses on sex, intimacy, relationships. And it means that, yes, of course, we do some talking. You kind of can't do this work without some talking. But always I'm looking to help my clients understand what they're struggling with, what they're experiencing through the experience of their body. So when they are feeling disconnected from sex, low libido, for example, well, are they disconnected from their bodies? Are they moving through the world not even aware of the fact that they're inhabiting a physical body, and how can we work together to rebuild that connection? It just means that I'm thinking about the body connection throughout our work together and finding opportunities to do work that engages on a physical body level as well.
Absolutely. And I see that often with my clients as well, specifically empathic people, because oftentimes when we struggle with trauma, we will literally disconnect from our body. And so how important is diving into our sexual trauma history in order to tackle that so we can overcome libido issues? And do libido issues play a role with sexual trauma that maybe we've had in the past?
Right. Well, I mean, so that disconnection that you're seeing your clients with sexual trauma histories experience, that's adaptive, right? That's a self-protective mechanism. So we don't want to try and yank that protective mechanism away too quickly, obviously, right? In the work that I do specifically, so I'm not a therapist. I am a coach. I don't treat or diagnose mental health illness, and I'm not a trauma specialist. I'm trauma informed. I'm very trauma aware. But if a client, and I've had multiple clients and have some now that have sexual trauma in their past, I work with them if they've done the work they need to do in some fashion to process, integrate that trauma, if it's not actively causing them frequent emotional dysregulation, right? If they're experiencing that, I'm not the best placed person to support them. I have referred out when I sort of encounter that. We'll get a few sessions in and realize, wait a minute, some things there are deeper and still need to be worked through. So I'll refer out to folks I know who have a trauma specialty. But in the work that I do, it will come up. I never dive into specifics I don't ask about specifics unless my client leads me there.
Of course.
Because at the end of the day, I don't actually the why, the wherefore doesn't, it's not particularly relevant. What I'm working with clients around is how is it like, so they're cut off from their body. They learn to protect themselves. All right. So they did a lot of work around that trauma history. They're ready to step into their intimacy and their sexuality in a new way. I'm going to take them on a journey to reconnect to their body. And as some of that past comes up, we'll make space for it. Right. But it's not a significant, we don't spend a significant chunk of time on it in our work together. At least that's the way that I work.
Absolutely. And I think, for me, because I work a lot with satanic ritual abuse people,
oh, wow,
yeah. Myself being one of those. And so what I could categorize within my sexual life in my younger years was I was associating sex with pain, emotional and physical pain. And so I could also relate my relationships to that, my marriage, everything was very disconnected. It didn't feel intimate. It didn't feel pleasurable, but it was because of the traumas that I had not processed. But once I started moving through those traumas and realizing that sex can be pleasurable, it can be intimate, it can be a beautiful, loving connection, that's when I really started to explore it more and have a deeper understanding. So for those of you listening out there, I do encourage you, if you haven't done the trauma work, to do the trauma work first, because it's so important, and it gives you a different kind of perspective once you've moved through that on intimacy and connection. Because I want to talk about intimacy and connection today, not necessarily trauma, but I also wanted to touch on the trauma because it does play a role, in that.
Absolutely does. And I mean, for my work ultimately is about helping people discover, understand, and celebrate their unique erotic nature, their unique experience of sexuality, and how they most want to experience sex, and then learn how to go out and get it and navigate it. That requires, whatever that looks like for you, it requires a degree of trust, a trust in your own body and yourself, and to be able to navigate and hold boundaries with your partners. And a significant trauma history has created a barrier to that sense of trust. Right. So yes, absolutely. 100%.
And how important is trust when it comes to intimacy, right? It's just, it's key, at least in my experience, it has been. And so, when we're talking about low sex drive, what are some things that you see when you're working with people that is causing some of these issues within, their libido?
So, I mean, so many things can affect libido. You mentioned associating sex with pain. Well, even if, you're not someone who has a significant trauma history or other associations like that, if you've had painful sex.
Yeah.
Right.
Or maybe your first experience was painful.
Right. Or, I have referred a number of people to work with pelvic floor therapists because they're experiencing pain upon intercourse. And when that's your experience, your body's going to naturally stop wanting sex in order to protect you.
Yeah.
In order to protect your body. Another thing, as a woman ages, we may not naturally produce as much lubrication. And there's a fairly significant stigma that still exists out there about lubrication and bringing it into the bedroom.
And I will say a natural remedy for that is watermelon, guys. I'm telling you, when you eat watermelon, it juices you up. I'm telling you, it's it's a very natural way to get your libido going. And so, 2 summers ago, for some reason, I was just craving watermelon, and my libido was off the charts. And so I started to correlate it with that. But you got to think watermelon's roughly 95% water. But I just wanted to throw that out there for those of you who may not love lube, that watermelon is a great alternative.
Well, that's super interesting. I'm going to have to maybe do a little personal experiment with that. But I also want to encourage folks to experiment with lubrication. I love it. I think it is one of the, it's always at hand in my sexy play times, whether it's solo play or partnered play. And there's a huge variety out there. Mm-hmm. And if you've tried it in the past, somewhat like it's not uncommon for folks with vulvas to not love a lot of their water-based lubes in particular. So experiment. You can get these really cheap or free packets, individual use packets, and just try a bunch out. Yeah. But it can make it just can be revolutionary for sex. There's also natural, more like alternatives like coconut oil.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that too. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So for men, you know, men who are having a hard time with erectile dysfunction, a natural remedy is called shilajit. Shilajit is a tar that they actually take off of the Himalayan mountains, and it's got 84 different minerals in it. And I have actually utilized this on a partner or two of mine who are older, you know, a little older than me, and they were having a hard time in this area. And I tell you, they were drinking it for about 7 days. Whoa, it's like natural Viagra. I'm telling you, shilajit, it's fantastic. So yeah, for those of you out there that are looking for alternative methods, I always love to provide those as well. And so when it comes to sex drive, I think too, our mental aspect is very important, right? As well as to when you're in the moment with that person. And if you're in your head, I will say the moments that I've had the worst intimacy have been when I'm stressed out or I have a lot going on at work or whatnot. So Gretchen, how does that play into low sex drive too?
It plays a huge role in one's libido, interest in sex, desire for sex, and arousal. If I don't know if you've read anything by Emily Nagoski or caught any of her YouTube. She's a prominent social science researcher and she focuses on sex and sexuality, and particularly from the woman's perspective, not exclusively, but she's written kind of a seminal work in this field called Come As You Are. I had to glance over. I was supposed to say, here she comes. That's not it. You are.
That's still a good.
By Dr. Nagoski. And she, in that book, talks about a dual control mechanism, basically that we're all influenced by two major factors. Set of things that make us think about sex and want sex and desire sex. Those are like the gas. That's like the gas pedal. It's like revving us up. Uh-huh. Then there's a set of things that cut us off, shuts down desire, stress, fights with partners,
resentment,
the lighting. Like I once went on a date with a dude and I was really expecting to have sex with him that night. And we went back to his house, back to his room, and the only lighting he had on in this room was bright overhead lights.
Oh,
shut me down.
Yeah.
So like a set of things that just
felt like you're on a movie set.
right. And not to go with like the lighting was just bad. It was not flattering at all. And it just was too much. And I can be a little sensitive to like harsh lighting anyway. And so, but like a set of things that cut you off from your experience of desire and interest in sex. There's a lot of ones that are common in both buckets, and then there can be some unique ones to each of us. So both of those factors are at play. Some of us, our sensitivity to the gas is really strong. So lots of things get us interested in sex. For others, our brakes are super sensitive. So the least little thing, right? And so how those two are playing out, that's what one of the things you can look at is what are your unique set of things that really get you interested and in that right frame, and then what are the things that cut you off, and how can we minimize one, maximize the other, and think about it a little bit more strategically. One of the other things that's pretty significant for many of us that are in long-term relationships is unspoken, unresolved issues.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Even if you think you've already gotten over it, you've dealt with it, it's in the past, you're over
still
it.
In your energetic field.
Still playing around in there. And this doesn't impact everyone's sexuality and interest in sex, but it does for a lot of folks. And so one of the early signs, one thing that can be an early sign of simmering issues in a relationship can be a drop in frequency of sex. Now, that's not the only thing, right? Can cause the drop off in sexual activity, but it's worth looking at and sort of making some space for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's very pertinent, because if you aren't communicating, okay, so many women, this is what women and men for say, I think men are a little bit more open to communicating their needs in the bedroom. But what I'm recognizing is a lot of women are hesitant to do that. And, when I work with them too, it's like, well, have you expressed to your husband that that's not pleasurable, or your spouse or your partner, whatever, that that's not pleasurable? No.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how do you think that person reads minds? Like, how do they know what pleasures you, and have you pleasured yourself? Do you even know what pleasures you? And I think, I work a lot with people in the religious sector as well, who are breaking out of that system and working through that. And there's a lot of persona in that you sometimes pleasure isn't always, the right thing to do, or you can't voice your intimate desires, or whatever. So have you recognized that with people that you're working with, that just communicating your needs and desires is an obstacle for people?
It's a huge obstacle, and it's something I spend a fair amount of time on with most of my clients. Not just that they're not giving voice to what they want, how they like to be touched, how they don't like to be touched. It's that for many of them, they don't even know what that is, especially for women, folks, socialized women, because our culture, the reason, you said something a moment ago about having this sense that more men are more prone to voicing their desires, for asking for what they want. That's because men have largely, by and large, been raised, taught that their pleasure matters, that that's what sex is about.
Interesting.
So of course they ask for what they want, because it's assumed that that's what they're having sex for, at a minimum. Most women have been socialized to believe that sex is also for the man's pleasure.
And for reproduction.
And that women are largely socialized to keep their legs closed. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah. And to be prim and proper in the bedroom, right?
Either until marriage, or until they find the person, their soulmate, their one. And then they find that person, then they're supposed to be sex kittens.
Yeah.
Right? So like,
you like to turn that switch on and off. Like
and sex is defined as penis and vagina. Mm-hmm. Sex starts when the man gets hard. Sex ends when he orgasms.
Yeah.
If you're lucky enough to get off before that, bonus. But think about that construct. Sex starts when he's hard. Mm-hmm. It ends when he orgasms. Of course, that's
a small amount of time.
Well, it doesn't have to be enough for all men, right? Right. But if that's our orientation, then her pleasure is incidental. It's like icing on the cake, maybe.
Yeah.
So in that context, one, her self-exploration as she was growing up was extremely taboo, mm-hmm. right? Dudes are expected to be masturbating 5 times a day once they reach a certain age, and jokes are made about it,
yeah.
Right? And just keep it like, put your socks in the hamper, and here's a box of tissues, and keep it up, close your door. Girls, it's like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah, you're a hussy. Yeah.
Okay, like, no, like you're gonna go and get pregnant by the time you're 16.
Exactly.
Keep that in your pants. So like,
not till you're married.
Ever.
Yeah.
Or you're engaged. Like, no, maybe not absolutely in all places, like until you're married, but you find the one,
your
soulmate, and then you can. So they never had that. For many of us, we never had that natural, just curious, exploring, learning how our bodies work, that we can then say to our partners, actually, this is how I like to be touched. I'm not even supposed to touch myself. So how am I supposed to show you how I like to be touched?
Exactly. And then having that shame behind it, that, oh my gosh, I'm expressing how I want to be pleasured. This is embarrassing. This is shameful. This,
I'm taking up too much space. I'm too much. I'm
yes.
taking too long. How many people I've talked to, how many women I've talked to that don't enjoy oral sex, and it's legitimate. Like, not everyone enjoys oral sex, but I've spoken to so many women who say they don't enjoy it, and then when you sit with it a little bit and she keeps talking, you hear, it just takes me too long. It's uncomfortable. Like, I'm uncomfortable. It takes me too long.
Yeah. But has she expressed to her partner how to do it? I think that's part of it as well. The men don't know what to do sometimes.
And you're also allowed to take time.
Yeah.
You're allowed to take time to get fully warmed up and turned on, and for the arousal to build.
Like, women are like crock pots, men are like microwaves, right? That old saying.
Yeah, that's an interesting one.
It's like, to each their own, tomato. Some people like foreplay, some people don't. I personally love it. I could do it all night long, but it's really, personal. It's a personal preference. And if you have been with partners your whole life that aren't good at foreplay, or you may not enjoy it because maybe it hurts, or they're not being gentle enough, or, they're not touching all the right buttons, or, whatever it may be, when you're with that right person and they take the time with you, whoa, that's when it can really rattle and shake you a little bit, So I think a lot of it too is, have you really explored and experimented with the right people? Right?
Yeah. I mean, the word foreplay, I don't love. More and more I'm trying to, and I end up using it from time to time because it's such a ubiquitous term, but more and more I'm trying to cut that word out of my vocabulary, because I like to think of instead a more expansive understanding of what constitutes sex.
Yeah, because it's all in there. It's all intimate.
There is social science research that shows, that's done with couples in long-term relationships, that those who have a broader understanding of what counts as sex have higher degrees of satisfaction with their sex lives.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
So don't think that it is penis and vagina sex until orgasm for one or both partners. Mm-hmm. And the stuff that comes before is just warm up to that. Yeah. That's a really limited definition of what counts as great sex.
It really does, because it can be all meshed and incorporated in there and be erotic and intimate and connecting and sensual and loving and compassionate and feisty and fun. I mean, whatever you want it.
Really hot without, yeah. There's so much on. One of the things I often end up working with my clients around is expanding their menu of broadening what's on the menu for sex for that. It can be revolutionary. I love it.
Yeah, and so that's leading into my next question. How do we access our erotic energy? How do we do that? Especially, men can usually get pretty erotic. Now, there's men out there who are like, oh, I could work on this area, but usually this is where we feel that sexual feminine energy just kind of rushing through our bodies. And I know I've worked in the tantric, I've done the Shakti Shiva energy, and I'm telling you, that stuff is mind-blowing, just rattles your system. And so how, if there's people out there who are, trying to access this erotic energy, where do they begin, if they're stuck or stagnant in their sex life?
So, it's a common starting point. Occasionally I'll get a client who is really tapped into and connected to their erotic energy. Brilliant, beautiful. And they've got some other challenges that we're working on. But Oh, so often, especially my female clients, and I'll do some version of this work as well with some of my male clients, particularly those who are coming to me to get better at dating.
Oh, okay.
But basically, it's a process to, one, reconnect with the body. I'll usually start with a really basic but pretty powerful erotic breathing practice.
Mm-hmm.
That first you got to drop in and like get in your body after we've talked and kind of been in our heads too much. And once we've done that, we start sort of visually, as we take in deeper breaths, visualizing that energy going to our genitals,
Mm-hmm.
whatever genitals you have, and connecting breath and presence with our genitals. Because I mean, I've heard so many people say their first time doing this exercise that the breath was great into the chest and the belly, and it kind of stopped somewhere around the upper pelvis.
Interesting.
Because they're moving through the world not realizing they have like the genitals are for when you come out, for you bring them out for the sexy times, and if you're not in the sexy times. So a lot of embodiment work, some disinhibition exercises if someone is just really self-conscious about this. Then breathing. And I've had clients be like, I was getting a little turned on, but I felt like there was like, I wasn't sure it was appropriate that I could do that. I'm like, that's the point.
That's the ticker right there.
And it's not that I turn them on or that they turn me on, that we're developing a desire for each other. It's that we're tapping into, each person is tapping into their own arousal,
Mm-hmm.
so that they can learn how to turn it on, tap into it when they want.
And breathwork, Gretchen, is so important. I mean, even when, you and your partner at a climax together, doing the breath work together, and it can lead into more extended orgasms. When you start to master breath work, it just really amplifies the connection, literally the physical, energetic, emotional, mental connection.
Yep.
Yeah.
Amazing. It's so powerful.
I love that. So it's like, and two, a lot of us are blocked off in that area. That's from an energetic standpoint, that's our sacral chakra, our sense of creativity, our sense of inspiration and whatnot. And many of us are blocked off in that area, or we might be too open in that area. It's like, I've had clients that are like, I just can't stop masturbating all the time. It's like, okay, we've got to move the energy, right? So it can be both sides of the spectrum. So, when we're accessing that erotic energy and moving that breath through the body, getting the blood circulating more and really focusing our intention and our energy towards that area, woohoo!
Amazing.
It's amazing.
And then the work is about, for many of my clients, it's then integrating that connection into their day-to-day. So one of my colleagues talks about like microdosing pleasure. So finding
I love that.
of pleasure, and I don't mean just sexual pleasure, but all kinds of pleasure, engaging all of your senses. And when you take some moments to be fully present to the scent of a flower or the feeling of the sun on your face or whatever it might be, and then take a really full breath up from your genitals, a little squeeze, and bring that little bit of arousal into the experience of your senses in your day-to-day.
Love that. And you said the word squeeze, and immediately I thought of Kegels. These are things we can do while we drive, while we're sitting on a Zoom call, while we're doing all these things. And that will also bring that blood circulation and that focus of energy down there. It's just clamping. And men and women, we can both do these, whatever gender you are, we can do these, right? So just clamping that area and doing, maybe making it a habit to do so many a day. And you will also notice that your partner will notice that as well. I've had that experience where you can really clamp on and then they're like, whoa, where'd that come from? So yeah. And just a lot of it is just putting more focus in that area, right, Gretchen? Just really bringing more energy in to our genitals, into our sacral area.
Yeah. And allowing allowing the awareness of that energy in your day to day, because for so many of us, we think it needs to be kept to the bedroom, and otherwise it's inappropriate or something. But it's just, it's a life spark. It's a life energy. People come to me and they're struggling with flirting. One of the first things I do is teach them this basic breathwork practice, and then help them learn to connect to their genitals in the moment when they want to start flirting. Like, that's the energy you want to bring to the conversation.
Yeah, because like you said, it's that chi, it's that life force energy, and that's where it focuses. It's right there. That's our center of creation, And so, how important, Gretchen, is the nervous system in all of this? When we're tapping into attuning our nervous system, because many of us are high strung, right? We've got these really nervous systems that are just going off the chain. And how can we attune that to a point where we can relax to be able to enjoy intimacy with our partner?
So I think nervous system awareness is so incredibly powerful in this space. I mean, one, it influences our day-to-day outside of physical intimacy or emotional intimacy, but I was talking about being connected to our bodies and getting out of our heads and grounding into our bodies so that we can breathe down and connect to our genitals and all of that. We can't do that if our nervous systems are jangling, right? If our nervous systems are constantly feeling a space of unsafety. So there's I just have sort of a grab bag of tools to help people learn to notice when their nervous system is activating, and how to mindfully kind of step in with really simple practices to move back towards a greater sense of calm and ease, right? It's a relevant and super helpful skill when you're talking about navigating difficult conversations in a relationship, right? I mean, relationships are basically containers to trigger us.
Yeah.
It's like multiple times in all the different ways. We really, if we're paying attention, we get to learn about our shit. But then we want to navigate it. We want to deal with it. We want to come back together around it. We want to repair it. That's really hard to do if we're spinning off in fight, flight, super high, right? So how can we recognize that, bring awareness to it, walk away if we need to, come back, do some things to move our systems back towards a greater sense of safety.
It's like a double-edged sword, because sex actually relieves that, right? It actually calms the nervous system after you have that orgasm, that release. So it is.
Well, and the
act of doing it,
right? The skin contact. Like one of the best things you can do when you're having a tough conversation with someone is to touch.
Yeah.
Right? To hold hands, or I don't know if you follow or listen to her podcast, but Esther Perel.
Oh, I've heard of it. Yes.
She's amazing. She's this amazing therapist. She's got probably multiple podcasts, but there's one that she's got where she basically records extended sessions with couples, and then edits it down to about an hour.
I've heard one of those before. Yeah.
And she will sometimes, when clients are spiraling in their converse, in the argument, she will have them lay down and hold hands. And she's like, you can't the argument can't sustain when you're laying down next to each other like that. It's just so ridiculous to lay down on the floor together.
Yeah.
The touch reminds each of you that you're human beings that matter. It can do that for you. When I'm having some of my toughest conversations with my partner, I'm like, I know we're really angry right now, but can we just hold hands and or hands on legs or forearms or something? And that touch is touch for co-regulation is amazing.
That's amazing. And just sitting there holding someone's hand and then taking deep breaths together before you start the conversation and just recentering yourselves. it will help with that lashing out, with the defense mechanisms, with all the things that are, boiling to the surface when we sit down and have a conversation, right? Just be like, all right, let's be in the present moment. Let's hold hands. Let's gaze into each other's eyes. Eye gazing is amazing as well. And let's breathe together before we start this conversation. That in itself are very simple tools to do. They're free, right? You're just sitting there together and you're giving each other that space. And, when you're communicating, listen when the other's speaking, and then the other person listen while you're speaking, and just be really respectable of each other's presence and in that now moment. And I love that. So Gretchen, I want to start to wrap up this show, but I cannot end this show without asking, because I know a lot of my listeners are probably like, all right, I'm stagnant in the bedroom. How do I spice it up? What are some good ways to spice it up in the bedroom?
I mean, that's going to look different for everyone, right? Depending on what your norm is and what your like routine is. But one of the things I like to encourage people to consider is looking at, so there's tons of checklists out there, sex checklists, like yes, no, maybe checklists. I, of course, have my own version on my website. There are a ton out there. And they're a great way to we all get in our routines.
Yeah.
And it's hard sometimes to think of what to do differently. And so it's a way to just scan through a list of like different types of toys, different positions, different types of role play,
locations,
scenarios, locations. Bringing in power play if that's your thing, and different dynamics of that, and all these things, to be like, oh my God, is that what? First of all, what is that? And then look, oh my gosh,
it's like watching 50 Shades of Grey when he does that with her, right? In the movie.
Although, that's not great representation.
He gives her a checklist, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and that's an unfortunate. It's not actually. You're never contractually obligated.
Exactly. I'm just picking. Right. I'm just picking.
Well, because I am kinky and I move in the BDSM world, and that series of books, while it was powerful in how it brought kink into the more popular mainstream, its representation of what a kink dynamic looks like, way off. It's toxic. It's not a good representation of that. But I like to use checklists just as a way to have a conversation around it and be like, oh, I tried this once, this is how it went. Or I've always kind of fantasized about it. Oh, really? Tell me your fantasy. That, right? Just the conversations that it can spark. And then you can pick one to try out together, right?
Oftentimes it starts in the mind. For many men, it does, right? So if it's women too. Women too, because it's
it's sex organ, it's the brain.
Fantasies, yeah.
Another good one is like visit a toy store together, a sex toy store. And walk around and kind of maybe go your different ways and put a few items in your cart, in your basket, and come back together and be like, ooh, what did you pick up? Or walk around together and see what sparks from that. I mean, there's lots of things that can be done. Those are just the two that kind of immediately.
I love that. I love that you have a checklist. So how can people find this checklist? Where do they find your website? If they want to schedule a session with you, where do they reach out to you?
Super simple. My website is my first and last name. So GretchenShanks.com. The checklist is at GretchenShanks.com/checklist.
Okay.
So and on the website, I've got a contact page. I also have a link to schedule a free consultation with me. I don't take anyone's money or start working with anyone until we've done a consultation.
Okay.
I really want to make sure that I'm a good fit for what someone is wanting to shift in their intimate life. And I'm not always the right person. So I want to make sure about that before, because it's an investment. I think it's a hugely valuable investment. I made a similar investment in my life and it changed my life and was well worth it. And you don't want to take the decision lightly. So I always believe in that free call first to to make sure.
Absolutely. And so do you provide sessions remotely or do they have to be in person?
I offer both.
Okay.
So I have some clients that are all Zoom, others that are all in person, and some that are a mix. So yeah. So I'm in Seattle, Washington.
I was going to ask you that. Where's your location? Okay, great. You're not far from me. I'm in Spokane. So
oh, nice. Perfect. That's fun. Yeah. So I have a space that I get to rent out for my in-person sessions in South Seattle. So it's really convenient.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Gretchen. I really appreciate you spending time with me today.
Sure.
And diving into all of these different aspects around why we may be struggling with our sex drive, why we may not be connecting with our partners, and why we may be having issues in the intimacy department. So thank you for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome. This was lots of fun. Thank you for having me.
You deserve to navigate your life as an empath in alignment with health, happiness, and abundance. To learn more about the services that I provide, including Beyond Quantum Healing Hypnosis, EFT Tapping, and the Emotion Code, visit my website at www.thesoulcafe.org.